Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted and privileged to welcome not just a very dear friend, but a very senior professional turned entrepreneur, Anu Prasad from India. Anu, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Anu is the founder and CEO of India Leaders for Social Sector, ILSS. She's the founding member of Ashoka University. She's the earlier founding Deputy Dean of Young India Fellowship. And I'm sure all you young people have heard about Ashoka University and Young India Fellowship. And she's worked earlier for American Express and TNT. So Anu, before I get into ILSS, you've had such an amazing journey from the corporate world to education in the social sector. Tell me about this journey.
Thank you, Ashutosh, and firstly, privileged to be here. So thank you for inviting me. Yes, I think, future of work really is many transitions. And I've had actually 6 career transitions from the corporate to where I am today, including a stint being a stay-at-home mom, which was also a career in itself. I truly believe that careers are no longer ladders. They're like jungle gyms. You sort of find your way in this VUCA world. You figure out what is your passion. And there's more and more talk about the passion economy, etc. So for me, it was really, I started a very conventional, BCom, MBA, corporate, Amex, great place to work. But at some point, I had this, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And I think and you will know that, Ashutosh, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
And so I was passionate about 2 things. One was travel. It bothered me. I'd read somewhere that Louvre has 9 million visitors and India has 9 million, 10 million visitors. And
Correct.
it was like, I have traveled extensively across India with your wife, Veera, who's a historian, noted historian, and just seen the splendors. So I wanted to sort of have more control on my time. I wanted to start a travel business. I wanted to be more fully present for my daughters because both my husband and me are basically workaholics, and the corporate world was just sort of something we were caught up in. So it was a step back saying, can I pursue this? Can I build my travel company? And so that was my sort of transition out of the corporate world. I ran that for a couple of years, and then I actually stayed home for I was just an active citizen in the community, but I wasn't. I shut my travel business for whatever reasons. Then I was a bit of a gig worker, consultant with Dell Foundation. And then I think what was really momentous for me was meeting Pramath 10 years ago, in about 2011. They were looking at setting up Ashoka University. It was a thought in their minds. And I was looking to go back to full-time work because I'd been an entrepreneur, I'd been a consultant. I felt like my daughters were older. I wanted to sort of go back to full-time work, and it was a great meeting, and that's how I became a part of Ashoka. And after Ashoka got really well known and established, my restlessness to do more in the development sector emerged, and that's how I've set up. So now I'm a social entrepreneur running ILSS for the past 4 years. Wonderful. So that's been my journey.
Fantastic. So that's a fantastic segue to the next set of questions, which is on India Leaders for Social Sector, ILSS. Tell me a little bit about this venture and what motivated you to start it.
No, absolutely. I truly believe that all of us need to be active, engaged citizens. I think India's development story is not a problem for one person to solve. We all need to be a part of the solution. In terms of, we've made great strides since independence, but we still, in the human development indicators, we are still at 130 out of 180 countries. So there is ways to go. India's development sector needs to be strengthened to work with the government to achieve, sort of last mile, support. And I was seeing this, Ashutosh, with the millennials, because at Ashoka University, I was the dean of the postgraduate program, and my students were all the millennials. They're far more thinking about sustainability, environment. It is their future. So I suddenly got exposed to a lot more of work in the development sector, and it was something I started feeling more and more passionately about. And second was, of course, being a lifelong learner. I think in India, you don't get enough opportunities to study after you finished your master's in the 20s.
Right.
And I realized at Ashoka that I loved studying. I was myself sitting in most of the classes on political economy, development economics, gender. So for me, ILSS has been like a convergence. The development sector requires, certain sort of interventions, and I'll come to that in a bit. And I love, continuous learning. So it was really building a learning and leadership program rooted in the development sector. That's what ILSS is.
Fantastic. Really. Fantastic. So, when I was reading about you, Anu, there is a comment which says ILSS aims to strengthen India's social sector by transforming the quality of leadership and talent. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the current challenges of leadership and talent that we face in our country?
No, absolutely. So Ashutosh, historically, India's development sector it's very passion and commitment driven. It wasn't a choice for a lot of talent that went into brightest and best, unless they were very passionately committed to a cause, didn't choose the development sector as their first option for many reasons, including the fact that there was low compensations, there were no structures. There has been a starvation cycle for the development sector, not enough funds available. So it wasn't the career of choice for most. But you do need, any sector needs talent. How will you grow? So there's been, in this last decade, two things that have happened. One is, of course, CSR and all the ultra high net, the whole billionaire giving. So a lot of private philanthropy has started coming into the sector, which is great news, right? From Mr. Premji and Mr. Nilekani onward. And of course, CSR as well. But the sector also needs to have that absorption capacity, because it's historically, there are apparently 3 million NGOs. So they're all small, scattered. Even 100 crore sized NGO would be in maybe two hands, right? Wow. Very few. So there is a challenge, because if you have to create impact at scale, you do need leadership.
Correct.
And when we were thinking about ILSS, Ashutosh, in 2017, Britspan actually came out with a data-driven report on the lack of leadership bench in the sector, which had some crazy, startling results. Like almost 50% of the nonprofits said they didn't have a succession plan. 97% of them said they didn't know how to build the leadership bench. So it was, there was a strong case for developing leaders, funding institution building, and bringing in leaders into the sector. So that's where we came in. We really came into that space of bringing talent to the sector.
Very interesting. And how does ILSS step in when you talk of leadership and talent, and how are you making a difference?
So Ashutosh, one of the things we decided when we started ILSS is, of course, there's a case to develop leadership within the development sector. So all the NGO leaders do need, leadership training. I mean, I was at Amex when I started my career, and we were doing this whole financial reengineering. I went through a lot of change management and other kinds of training, right? So one is, of course, upskilling within the sector, and ILSS does do that. But really, a quicker fix really was to look at leadership from the private sector that may be almost like me. I'm a corporate crossover. There might be more people who are saying, yeah, marketing kar liya, I've done this for 20 years. What next? I'm looking for something. I'm looking for more purpose. I'm looking to either pay it forward, give back. I'm looking for some purpose. I don't know what to do. I don't even know what I don't know, And we said, and Ashish, my core anchor funder is Ashish Dhawan, who was private equity to philanthropy. So, in his early 40s, he made that journey. So we thought maybe we'll find some people like this and we'll bring them here. And with their technology skills, their operation skills, strategy skills, HR skills, with a little bit of understanding context, we'll bring them into the development sector. So that was our first program, Ashutosh. But it's been phenomenal. We have more than 270 senior corporate leaders who've done this transition and growing. So the good news is there are many who are who are thinking about India's development sector and taking a leap of faith in their second careers. Sure, I mean, it's a second career, but it's
so
great.
Somehow the message I'm getting from you, Anu, is that it is not someone like me who has spent 4 decades in the corporate sector or something and said, okay, time to hang up my gloves and now do something different. It is actually the younger professionals who are consciously making a change. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that convergence is happening everywhere, right? Why must we live in development sector and corporate sector silos? I mean, corporates are talking about ESG.
Correct.
Government is talking about lateral hires. So, I think there is a viable career for younger professionals, which is at the convergence of, private, public, government, strategy. It's a great place to be, a great time to be looking at the development sector. It's a good place to be.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, this is actually, if you'll permit me to use the term, you're actually corporatizing the social sector
yes.
with some great talent and adding a lot of value to them through ILSS.
I think so. I mean, I'd get some flack for saying corporatizing because there is a concern, but more professionalizing, I know. Creating structures, creating processes, amplifying the work, creating sort of advocacy. Well so said. Yes, I think so.
Well said. So when I was looking at your website, there are 3 distinct programs that you talk about, Anu. One is the ILSS Leadership Program. The second is the ILSS People Practices Program. The third is the ILSS Board Program. Can you take a few minutes and take me through each of these programs that you run?
Absolutely. So the leadership program, Ashutosh, is really what we started with, which is the senior corporate leaders, not just corporate leaders. I'll be honest, it could be from people from the armed forces. We do get them, people who've taken early retirement, returning moms like me, women who sort of left the workforce and want to come back. We think they're great, who we put them through a learning journey. It started with a 9-day boot camp at Ashoka University. I requested them to be my hosting partners at that point. Now it's online, but it's really giving them a context of the social sector so that even if you're coming here, you have an understanding of where you're coming and an appreciation. It's frustrating, it's slow, it's generational change, but it's also hugely rewarding.
Correct.
So we sort of make it a softer landing to move leadership here. And there's a huge demand because we also place people. The board program was, Ashutosh, a lot of people reached out to me, say someone like you, decades of strategy experience, you've sat on boards. You'll say, Anu, in my portfolio of time, I can give a couple of hours to the development sector, but I'm not moving there full time. For us, we need all that, that sort of that learning and that knowledge. So we started the board program saying this development sector, nonprofit CEOs need a strong board. Just like any organization, because it's governance, it's mentorship, it's strategy. You need a board to sort of guide you. Can we get these senior leaders to actually understand the sector again, but understand what it means to sit on a board for a nonprofit and then put them in nonprofit boards? So really it's trying to tap into talent and taking as much time. If you gave me time, I have a choice. I could, make you volunteer, I could make you consult, I could make you sit on a board, but I need those 5 hours. I don't want to let it go because it's valuable. So that's the genesis of the board program. And the third was People Practices is really an upskilling program for social sector leaders. It's one thing to get talent, but you must understand how to retain, attract, nurture, develop your talent, especially when money is not in the mix. We don't pay a lot in the social sector. So the reward is the joy is in the work. So, if your work is values aligned, if you feel a sense of sort of autonomy and ownership, that's when you'll be able to sort of really engage with the work. So we've launched that program for social sector leadership to understand. And so that's broadly, those are our 3.
So, when you say 5 hours, is it 5 hours a week, 5 hours a month? Which 5 hours are you looking for?
Oh, I'll take 5 hours a day. I'll take whatever, because okay. I stay in a space where at ILSS, we are very close to nonprofit leaders. and non-profit organizations, especially the smaller ones. I'll be honest, I'm not solving for Pratham. It's a huge NGO, or Akshay Patsa. They're huge, wonderful NGOs doing great work, have fantastic boards. But there are wonderful younger organizations doing great work in underserved areas that we want to really help. And so, I will take 5 hours a day, 5 hours a month, 5 hours a week, whatever you give. Amazing. Because I think it's very, very valuable.
Amazing, amazing. That's an amazing definition of 5 hours, Anu. So there is another aspect that I thought I would ask you to give your perspective, that in the corporate world, and I'm not relating the corporate world to the social sector at all, but the whole concept of coaching and mentoring has become very large. And there are a lot of coaches and mentors who may probably consider doing some pro bono work for the social sector. Is there a place for them as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I'll tell you and I say this with complete conviction, the hardest role is the CEO of a nonprofit, Ashutosh. Funding is tough. Talent is tough. How do you scale? If you don't scale, where are you headed? It's a tough world. There is no enabling environment. Now there is growing. There are more philanthropists who are understanding, are being more supportive. But the conventional wisdom was that the money should be a throughput. I'm giving you money, it should go to the end beneficiary, and very little should stay in between.
Absolutely.
Coaches play such an important role. There is, especially through COVID, there's been so much of mental health issues. So I think I have a coach, and he has been, and I'm very vocal about him. But I wish there were more coaches who would give time to, and he gives time, a certain percentage of his time, 15%, I think, or 20% to nonprofit leaders. I wish coaching people would step up and say, we're willing to give time to nonprofit leaders. I'd love to meet them. Yes.
Amazing. So now let me move on now. You also have an ILSS fundraising program. Tell me a little about this program and how is this benefiting the social sector?
So, fundraising is the fuel. I mean, you have to raise funds if you have to grow. And if you don't grow, what's the point? In India, it's multitude, it's a big country.
Correct.
To create impact at scale, you have to understand how to fundraise. I saw this firsthand at Ashoka, and I saw how they raised the level of Ashoka is crowdfunded.
Yep.
As you know, there's no single person that owns Ashoka, right? If there are 150 or 200 founders. And I saw that it was very strategic, very thought through. There's a great deal of donor stewardship and research, right? So it was very, but also I can tell you, Ashutosh, as a CEO, I hate fundraising. It's one of those things which is like, you don't like to do it, but you must do it and you must get good at it. So we decided that there is a whole learning, there is a whole strategy to teaching people. Firstly, it's a mindset shift, but beyond that, it's a job like sales, right? And Ashutosh, I would have, sales heads of corporate India joining my ILSS program, but not wanting to go into fundraising. And I would say, why not, right? It's business development, sales, why can't you fundraise? But there was such a thing against fundraising. So for us, it was really changing that and giving that profession of the legitimacy it deserves. Frankly, if you don't fundraise, you don't exist. Today, a Stanford or a Harvard have $1 billion of endowment and they still actively fundraise.
Correct.
So just giving that respect to that profession, to that function, but also teaching that there is a strategy. You have to do your research. You have to, how you give your pitch, how do you speak, how do you engage with your donors. It's an art and a science.
Right.
And we really wanted to teach that. So we've been running very successfully that program now for through COVID, last year and a half. And, we are seeing the results of that. We're seeing people raising more and more funds. See, there's enough money in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, Tirupati has 14,000 crores in FD. I mean, there's enough money in the country.
I agree. But also, Anu, you mentioned very briefly about CSR, and the CSR funds are available. Yes. How are companies responding to fundraising from the social sector?
I think it's been I am hugely optimistic about India, and that is because I work in the development sector. I am seeing, even in the last decade, the amount of change we are seeing. I do see CSR respond to effective pitches, to maybe more long-term commitment. It's there is a requirement, obviously, because it is legal, but really being more being more mindful of institutional funding, supporting not just through the funds, but even otherwise supporting work. So I am just totally optimistic about um, India's development story, and just people who are coming forward and at CSR for philanthropy, and of course the social sector itself and their leadership.
Wonderful. So Anu, I'm now going to move to the next segment of our conversation. My viewers and listeners love to get to know my guest a little better. So I have a couple of questions for you, what I call personal questions. My first question to you is that, it's such an amazing career that you've had, moving from the corporate world to entrepreneurship, to education, to social sector, and doing so many different things. What would you say are 3 key milestones or pivot points in your life or your career?
I think the 3 for me would be, one was, of course, just returning to full-time work, Ashutosh. And yet again, if there are young people who've taken a break in their career and, 2-3 years, I know there's an inertia. Come back. Female workforce participation in India is really low. We need you to come back. There's enough and more work to be done. I came back, and it's the best thing I did. Fantastic. So I think that decision, and my daughters, some of my girlfriends were the ones who said, get off your backside. Your daughters don't need you anymore. Go back to work. So that was a pivotal decision to come back to full-time working. Second is, of course, for me, being a part of building Ashoka University. It was just to see an idea, and now to see what it is in less than a decade. It's only been a decade. Huge learning, steep learning curve, very hard work. I came from BCom MBA. Nothing in my life taught me academics. But I was supported by a lot of very, very smart people, and so that was a great pivot. And I think for me now, I've found my passion. After 6 transitions, just being in the development sector, I'm a big brand ambassador. I feel everyone needs to give their time, full-time, part-time, anytime, to engaging with development issues. And of course, being an active citizen starts at home. So that too. So I think the 3 pivots are these.
Well said, well said. So I've got time for 2 more questions. First, now someone who's leading such an amazing organization in the social sector, what are some of the core values you believe in?
So I think the most important for me would be humility. I think the day you feel like I know it all is the day is the end of you. It's also something I look for in my senior leaders, because if you don't, the world is changing. And if you don't have the humility and the learning mindset, you're not going to be able to sort of move with the times. So I do look for humility. In fact, even through my leadership flagship program, these are very successful men and women from corporate India, who've run billions of dollars of P&L. But I'm always looking for that humility, because you don't know where you're coming. So have the humility to listen.
Well said.
So
well said. Well said. And my last, sorry, go ahead.
What is just excellence? I think, I think excellence is just something we really believe in, and a service orientation. So I would say these 2-3 things.
Humility and excellence, both great values to have. And my last question to you, Anu, you keep doing such amazing work. Who or what inspires you?
Oh, so many development sector leaders. Anshu of Gunj. I mean, I have heard Anshu speak maybe, I don't know how many ever times.
I interviewed him also,
I mean, he just is so inspiring. He talks about dignity, and I'm usually in tears when I hear him. Many. Social sector has many, many inspiring leaders. Kamla Bhasin, late Kamla Bhasin, when she spoke about gender, very inspiring. So I think for me, it's like the sort of not recognized, not celebrated enough social sector leaders who are doing a phenomenal job in wherever and whatever. It's tough, right? There's no, like I said, the environment is tough. but they soldier on because they need to.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I think many of them. Yeah.
Fantastic. Anu, on that note, thank you so much for speaking to me. I thought I knew you well over the last 2 decades, but the last 25 minutes talking to you has given me a very, very new perspective about you. Thank you for speaking to me about the amazing work you and your team are doing at India Leaders for Social Sector, ILSS. Thank you for reaching out to so many leaders around the country and training them in the special skills that obviously are needed to run the social sector. I mean, it's not just easy to say that I ran a large company and now I can run a social sector organization. Thank you for sharing with me some of your own milestones, some of your own values, and your thoughts. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh, for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.